52 and half my body wouldn't move. I remember the hospital light trembling across the white tiles, the air thick with disinfectant and rain. He stood at the foot of my bed, zipping the suitcase we bought on our anniversary, the one we once packed with laughter and sunscreen. Not silence. "The trip is already paid for, baby," he said softly, avoiding my eyes. "You just rest. I'll be back soon." The sound of that zipper cut deeper than any word he spoke. It was the sound of someone closing a chapter you hadn't finished reading. My right hand twitched on the blanket, trying to reach for him, but only my fingers remembered how to move. He leaned down, kissed my forehead like a man clocking out of duty, and whispered something that might have been love or guilt. The door clicked behind him. Then came the echo, footsteps fading, replaced by the steady beep of my fur pump. Each tone felt like a clock marking his distance. The nurse entered, adjusting the line on my wrist. "He'll be back soon," she said kindly. I smiled, because lies sound gentler when spoken softly. Outside, the rain pressed its face against the window, as if it too wanted to come inside. I stared at the chair beside my bed, the one he used to sit on when we talked about growing old together. Now it waited empty, like something sacred abandoned. My reflection in the window looked foreign. A woman half paralyzed, half awake, and entirely alone. It was in that silence I understood betrayal doesn't always storm and shouting. Sometimes it simply walks away, wearing cologne and calmness. Some betrayals were perfume and smile goodbye. The nurse replaced my four and whispered, "Your husband called, his flight landed safely." Her voice was gentle, but the words felt like a knife wrapped in silk. Outside, rain pressed softly against the window, tracing slow rivers down the glass. The chair beside me still carried the shape of his coat, the faint crease where his arm used to rest, the ghost of warmth that hadn't yet faded. It was strange how an empty chair could hold more truth than 1,000 promises. I tried to reach for it. My hand trembled halfway, then stopped. My body refused, just like he had. My fingers curled inward, useless, as if they too had given up. The clock on the wall ticked in rhythm with the four beeps. Tick, drip, tick, drip. The sounds tangled into something almost like company. I counted them to keep from crying. A nurse left a cup of tea by the tray, steam curling upward in thin, lonely spirals. The smell reminded me of home, of mornings when he'd say, "Don't worry, I'll always take care of you." I used to believe him. Now the words tasted like something spoiled. Rain light shimmered over the chair's armrest. I imagined him sitting there again, smiling, holding my hand, telling me he'd canceled the trip because I mattered more. But imagination has cruel timing. When I blinked, the chair was still empty, and so was the space where hope should have been. That night, I asked the nurse to turn off the lights early. Darkness was easier than pretending someone would walk through that door. Loneliness, I learned, doesn't scream. It just beats softly, endlessly against hospital walls, until it sounds like your own heart. Loneliness sounds like a heartbeat echoing off hospital walls. The phone buzzed against a metal tray, a small sound that filled the whole room. I fumbled to press the green button, my fingers stiff and slow. His voice came through bright, too bright, like sunlight that burns instead of warms. "Blue water everywhere," he said, laughter echoing faintly behind him. "You'd love it here, baby." There was music, wind, the distant crash of waves, all the things we once dreamed of seeing together. I stared at my fur line, tracing the slow drip feeding life into my veins. The smell of antiseptic replaced salt air. My heart didn't know whether to ache or laugh. "I'm sure I would," I whispered, careful to keep my tone even. My lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, but close enough to fool the air around me. He didn't notice the silence between my words. He never did. "You just get better, okay? We'll do this again when you're stronger." His voice sounded rehearsed, almost cheerful. Someone in the background called his name, and the sound of another woman's laughter folded softly into the wind. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink. The white walls leaned closer. The tea on my tray had gone cold. I could almost hear the sea he described, but it didn't sound like freedom anymore. It sounded like distance. "Blue and endless. Take care," he said. Before the line clicked dead, The phone screen dimmed slowly, until it reflected my face pale, still, the four-line like a quiet chain. I placed the phone down carefully beside the untouched cup and turned toward the window. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray-heavy, patient, and watching. Sometimes the cruelest distance doesn't live in miles. It fits inside a single call. The young nurse avoided my eyes when she adjusted the pillows. Her hands were gentle, but her silence was louder than any comfort. She straightened the blanket, checked the monitor, then hummed a tune I didn't recognize, something light, something that didn't belong in a room like this. Behind her soft hum, pity hummed louder. I could feel it brushing against my skin, like a draft through a half-open window. People think you can't hear pity, but you can. It has a temperature, a rhythm, a weight. She asked if I needed anything. I wanted to say, yes, I need my husband to come back. But I just smiled and said, no, I'm fine. That week, I learned to read silence better than speech. When they said you're recovering well, what they really meant was you're alone. When they said rest, they meant don't cry. The clock above the door clicked every few seconds, a small, patient sound that filled the room when everything else stopped. I counted those seconds, as if each one would pull me closer to strength. Instead, they only pulled me deeper into the truth. No one was coming. The nurse refilled my water jug, hesitating just long enough for me to notice. She looked like she wanted to say something, maybe an apology for a kindness she couldn't give. But she didn't. She just touched my wrist lightly and walked away, leaving the faint scent of soap and sorrow behind. I waited until the door clicked shut. Only then did I let the tear roll down, one, not more. I wasn't crying for him anymore. I was crying for the part of me that still believed kindness meant love. Dignity is learning to hold your tears until the door closes. The phone on my tray pinged again, another photo. Palm trees, cocktails, my daughter's caption, family goals. The blue sky behind them looked almost fake, like the kind you see on postcards you never receive. My hand trembled as I scrolled. My husband laughing in sunglasses, my children around him, their smiles wide, untouched by the word stroke. The speech therapist sat across from me, her clipboard balanced on her knee. Let's try the word home, she said gently. I opened my mouth, shaped the sound carefully, but it came out hope. She smiled, pretending not to notice the difference. That's close enough. Her kindness made it worse, because I knew home was gone, and hope was all I had left. The phone pinged again. This time it was a video. My husband toasting with champagne, saying, to life and to love. My daughter's laughter in the background echoed against the hospital walls. The therapist turned off the metronome and said softly, let's take a break. I nodded, staring at the phone screen until it dimmed. I could see my reflection, pale, tired, mouth still trembling from effort. I didn't recognize the woman in the glass. She looked like someone who had already forgiven too much. A nurse passed by, adjusting a curtain. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the scent of the roses on my bedside table, the ones the hospital sent. Not him. I turned the phone face down. For the first time, the silence felt clean. No alerts, no filtered happiness. Just me, my breath, and the slow rhythm of healing, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. That afternoon, when the therapist asked me to say home again, I didn't try. I just closed my eyes and whispered enough. Healing, I realized, begins the moment you stop explaining your pain. It was raining that morning when I asked for my phone. The nurse smiled gently, thinking I wanted to call my husband. She even offered to dial the number for me. I told her I could manage. My fingers were slow, stiff from the stroke, but I knew the digits by heart, not his. But my lawyers. The phone pressed cold against my ear as I waited for the line to connect. Mrs. Ramon? His voice was calm, even, like the sound of rain on old windows. Yes, I said, though my voice trembled. I need to make some changes. He didn't ask why. Good lawyers never do. He simply said, of course, I'll come by tomorrow. You just rest. After the call, I sat still for a long while. The nurse brought my breakfast untouched and asked softly, everything all right? Perfect, I said. It wasn't a lie, not entirely. For the first time in weeks, I felt something sharper than sadness, The next morning, he arrived suit-pressed, umbrella dripping by the door. The faint smell of rain and paper followed him in. He placed his briefcase on the tray beside the cold tea. "You don't need to rush," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Just tell me what you want." I told him about the new will, who should get what, and who shouldn't. Every word felt like a stitch closing an old wound. My signature was shaky, but it was mine. When he left, I watched his umbrella disappear down the wet path. The rain had softened, turning to mist. The hospital room smelled faintly of ink. That night, I slept without dreams. Because when love dies quietly, reason has to rise and take its place, steady, unshaking, and mercilessly clear. The papers smelled faintly of ink and lemon sanitizer. The nurse had placed a brown folder on my table after lunch, not knowing what it held. She thought it was hospital paperwork. It was T.it was my old will, the one I signed years ago with shaking laughter and blind faith. My husband's name sat there beside mine, printed in bold, like it owned the page. For a long time, I just stared at it. The machines beside me clicked and beeped softly, each sound marking another second of realization. The documents were dated 3 years back, our anniversary week. That was the same night we promised each other forever. Just before the first secret began, I ran my finger along the edges of the paper, feeling the slight ridge of his signature. It looked steady, confident, the kind of handwriting that never hesitated. I used to admire that. Now, it felt like arrogance trapped in ink, line after line. I read the promises I had written with love, the same love that now felt like a mistake carved into legal form. Every paragraph was a memory dressed in betrayal. Everything I had built, I had offered freely. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried its scent, a mix of renewal and regret. I folded the papers slowly, pressing down each crease as if sealing something shut for good. When the nurse returned, she glanced at me and smiled. "All done with your reading?" I nodded. "Yes," I said quietly. "I finally understand what I signed." She didn't ask what I meant, and I didn't explain, because trust always looks beautiful until you finally read the fine print. Ruby brought flowers and too many details. The lilies were white, too perfect, too clean for a day like this. She set them down by my bedside and adjusted the vase as if the symmetry of it all could fix the imbalance in my chest. "They left 2 days ago, right? Such a big trip for them," she chirped, brushing off invisible dust from her sweater. "Langston looked so excited at the airport. Told me you insisted they go. Said you wanted them to enjoy it for you." Her voice blurred after that. I remember only fragments. Airport, smiles, tropical drinks. I stared at the lilies there, petals trembling slightly in the draft from the air conditioner. For a moment, I imagined they were shivering too, cold from carrying someone else's lie. Ruby kept talking. "Oh, and your daughter looks stunning. That red dress, she said it was a gift from you." She laughed softly, then caught herself. "I mean, you're so generous. Always have been." The laughter faded, leaving only the steady rhythm of the 4 beeping. I watched a slow drip of medicine slide through the clear tube, each drop heavier than the last. My hand twitched, a faint, almost forgotten motion, and I gripped the edge of the blanket to stop it from trembling. Ruby finally noticed the silence she'd stepped into. "I should let you rest," she said awkwardly. "I just wanted to say, you raised a lovely family." Lovely. The word fell like glass on tile. She smiled, gave my hand a gentle pat, and left with the soft scent of her perfume trailing behind. For a long time after she was gone, I stared at the door she had closed so carefully, as if afraid to wake the truth she'd just delivered. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive in confession or confrontation, it comes dressed in kind eyes, carrying flowers, and leaves you holding what's left of your peace. The wind moved the chimes above the rehab gate, a soft, uneven sound like someone remembering how to breathe. I sat by the small patch of marigolds, my wheelchair tilted slightly toward the sun. The world smelled of wet soil and antiseptic. Somewhere beyond the fence, laughter drifted in light, careless, belonging to people who didn't know what it meant to lose. I could tell it was a couple. The tone, the rhythm, the shared secret in their voices. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let myself pretend it was us before the distance, Before the excuses, before he began to smile more at his phone than at me, a leaf brushed against my wrist. The nurse said I should move my fingers more often, but I liked it better when nature did it for me. It reminded me that something still wanted to touch me, even if gently, even if by accident. The sound of a child's laughter joined the wind. It was fuller, rounder, unashamed. It made me think of my daughter when she was 5, running barefoot through puddles while I warned her about the rain. She had looked back once and shouted, "It's just water, Mama." Now the water lived inside me, behind my eyes, in my throat, and I had no energy to run from it. I tilted my face up, feeling the sun break through a thin layer of cloud. The warmth didn't erase the ache, but it softened it the way light sometimes makes cracks look like patterns. For the first time in weeks, I didn't measure my loss by what others had. I let the chimes sing and the wind carry the sound away. Some wounds don't close when you stop bleeding, they close when you stop comparing. He entered the hospital room smelling of sunscreen and sea. The scent didn't belong here, not among bleach, metal trays, and the hum of oxygen. It clung to him, warm and careless, the kind of scent that forgets. "You look better already," he said, setting his sunglasses on the windowsill, as if this was just another visit, as if days hadn't stretched into echoes since he left. His voice was light, practiced, almost cheerful. A man who had convinced himself he'd done nothing wrong. I nodded. The left corner of my mouth obeyed. The right stayed still, a reminder of what his absence had cost me. "Yes," I managed, my voice thin as thread. "So do you." He chuckled, missing the weight under my words. "The Maldives were healing," he said, adjusting the strap of his expensive watch. "We all needed it, you know. The kids loved it. You'd have loved the sunsets." I wanted to tell him that I did see sunsets, the ones that slipped through the blinds each night, painting the white walls with quiet fire. I watched them alone, counting the seconds between heartbeats, pretending that stillness was peace. He placed a shell on my bedside table. "Thought you'd like a souvenir." The shell was small, pearly, fragile. It looked too delicate to survive the ocean, yet somehow it had. I turned it in my weak hand, feeling its edges press against my palm. For a moment, I imagined throwing it, but my arm wouldn't rise. Instead, I smiled, the kind that ends things without sound. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and said, "I'll bring the kids tomorrow. Rest, okay?" Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. The air felt heavier once he was gone. I looked at the shell again. Its spiral perfect and empty. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come from love, it comes from realizing you no longer expect anything back. The soup was lukewarm. The silence was boiling. Across the small hospital cafeteria table, he smiled too easily, the kind of smile people used to patch over guilt. The fluorescent lights flickered above us, cutting his face into alternating pieces of shadow and shine. He stirred his soup, clinking the spoon against the bowl. "You know, I kept thinking about you there," he said casually. "Every morning, watching the sunrise, I thought she'd love this." I looked at the clock instead. The second hand moved in small, perfect circles, each tick. A sound softer than justice but sharper than forgiveness. He kept talking. About the resort, the ocean breeze, the seafood buffet. His words rolled like waves, steady and self-assured, washing over the cracks he didn't want to see. I nodded occasionally, my hand resting beside the water glass. My fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness this time, but from control. It's strange how still you can become when you finally stop caring. A nurse passed by and smiled. "How lovely having dinner together," she said. He nodded proudly, like a man fulfilling his duty. I smiled back too, because she couldn't see the truth simmering under the table. He reached across, touched my wrist gently. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. I met his eyes, the same eyes that once promised forever, and replied softly, "I had no choice." He chuckled, mistaking my calm for peace. He didn't know peace can hide a storm, that silence isn't surrender. It's storage. When the dinner ended, he stood, kissed my forehead again, and said, "Next week, we'll have you home." As he walked away, I noticed a drop of soup cooling on the tablecloth. It spread slowly, patiently finding its way through the fabric, Revenge doesn't always need anger. Sometimes patience cuts cleaner under the sterile hospital light. I folded the paper carefully once, twice, then again. The edges met like two truths finally aligning. My handwriting wavered at first, unsure whether to tremble or stand firm. But as the pen moved, so did I. The words came slowly, each one a quiet verdict disguised as civility. Thank you for your care. I understand your choices. We both deserve peace separately. Every sentence was measured, precise, written not to wound but to end. The nurse paused by my bed and asked gently, "Are you writing to him?" I smiled, sealing the envelope. Something like that. She didn't need to know it wasn't a love letter. It was a document of release, one written in calm ink, not tears. Outside, dawn crept through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across the sheets. The world was moving on schedule, as if nothing monumental had just happened. I placed the envelope on the table beside the lawyer's folder. Both looked innocent, but both could rewrite a life. My hand brushed over the paper once more. His name sat there, clean and final. I thought about how much power a name loses when it stops meaning home.by morning. The envelope rested inside the lawyer's bag, stamped, signed, and properly witnessed. Not a love letter, not a confession, a quiet ending, written by the woman he underestimated. The 4-pump clicked softly beside me, marking time in steady drips. For the first time since the stroke, my breath matched its rhythm. Some goodbyes don't need tears or confrontation. Some only need paper, ink, and the strength to stop explaining yourself. Closure, after all, is best signed. Sealed and witnessed, the pen felt heavier than my hand, as if it carried years of silence, years of pretending. The lawyer sat across from me, glasses fogging from the humidity that clung to the hospital room. He waited, patient but certain, while I stared at the line that once carried his name. I thought about the Maldives, the sound of his laughter over blue water I'd never see. I thought about the chair beside my bed, the one that still remembered his coat but not his presence. Then, slowly, I pressed the pen down. The stroke of ink cut clean through his name. Not in anger, not in vengeance, in release. Each signature afterward was a quiet rebirth. The estate that once mirrored our dreams now bore only mine. A scholarship fund for women recovering from illness. A donation to the nurses who held my hand when he wouldn't. The lawyer's pen tapped lightly as he reviewed each page. "Are you sure, Mrs.?" he began, but my look stopped him. I had never been surer of anything. Outside, thunder rolled across the gray afternoon sky. It sounded like applause, not from the world, but from something inside me that had waited too long to speak. I signed the last page and exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and grief. He was still somewhere in photographs, sipping something sweet under a blue horizon. Unaware that a different kind of tide had turned, I closed the folder, pushed it toward the lawyer, and said softly, "That will be all." He nodded, gathering the papers as if handling something sacred. And maybe it was. Freedom doesn't always come from walking away. Sometimes it comes from sitting still, steadying your hand, and rewriting the ending yourself. The door opened with practiced cheer, the kind you bring into hospitals when you don't want to face what's real. My children entered like guests in a waiting room, carrying perfume, chocolates, and the scent of hesitation. "Mom, you look so much better," my daughter said, her tone a shade too bright. My son arranged the flowers on the windowsill, careful not to meet my eyes. Their voices filled the sterile air, bouncing off machines that beeped in honest rhythm. We talked about the weather, the garden, even the neighbor's new dog, everything except what mattered. I poured tea from the plastic flask a nurse had left me, my hand steady, my words slow. Then, between sips, I said it, calmly, "I've rewritten my will." The silence that followed felt like a curtain falling. My daughter's smile froze halfway. My son stopped stirring his cup. For a moment, the only sound was the rain pressing against the window, patient, persistent, impossible to ignore. I explained what I'd done. The donations, the scholarships, the removal of certain names. No anger, no defense, just facts laid bare like a clean wound. My daughter tried to speak, but her voice broke into a whisper. "You didn't even tell us." I looked at them, the people I had once lived for, sacrificed for, and realized how far we'd all drifted. Some things, I said softly, are better said through actions. They left a little earlier than usual, their chocolates unopened, their perfume lingering long after they'd gone. I stared at the half-empty teacups, the imprint of their hands still warm on the table, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace, because love that survives truth becomes quiet, but never cold. The teacup trembled slightly as steam rose against the pale morning. Outside, the first light of dawn painted the hospital walls in soft gold. No monitors, no beeping, no hurried footsteps, just a rhythm of my own breathing. I lifted the cup with both hands this time. The tremor that once betrayed weakness now felt like proof of survival. Across the glass, the garden glistened with dew, and somewhere in the distance, a bell rang. Not for me. Not anymore. They said I would need time to heal. But healing isn't just about muscles and nerves. It's about memory, about letting go of the rooms where love used to live and leaving the lights off when you walk away. I thought of him, his tan skin, his laughter, the scent of ocean that once clung to his clothes. Maybe he'd wake up today and feel something missing, a space where my silence used to be. Maybe not. Either way, it no longer mattered. The lawyer's folder was gone. The will was signed. The children knew. And I, for the first time in years, felt no need to explain, justify, or forgive. I had rewritten my ending not with rage, but with stillness. A bird landed on the ledge, its wings brushing against the steam. I smiled softly. Freedom doesn't shout, it breathes. If you're still listening, hold your tea close tonight. Let it remind you. Peace is the final form of revenge. And if stories like this touch something inside you, that quiet part that still believes in strength after heartbreak, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories waiting here, for hearts that heal in silence.